who will give remarks immediately following the film and help us frame our collective conversation about the goal of this project, which is to think about what can and must we do about the persistent school failure of African American boys and other many marginalized youth. So I want to really thank you all for being here with us this afternoon and to be a part of this conversation. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Dean Doug Bicklin, who is here in the room. For his vision and his leadership of this series. He's trusted me and the committee in bringing to you speakers and films like Beyond the Bricks, and so we're really excited about the work we're able to do. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Jennifer Russo and her team for their coordination of the series. Give them a round of applause. And they're working to get more seats, so hopefully. But before I say a bit more about our guest speakers, I want to also bring your attention to some other events that we have going on. And I believe you would have received a flyer coming in. So on March 21st, we're bringing Dr. Arnitha Ball of Stanford University, who's the past president of the American Educational Research Association, and she'll be talking about preparing teachers for diversity in the 21st century, persisting challenges, lessons learned, and crafting an agenda for the future. That's Thursday, March 21st. On Thursday, April 11th at 4 p.m., professor at Stanford University, David Laverie, will be here to talk about balancing access and advantage in the history of American schooling. He is the author of the book, Someone Has to Fail, the Zero-Sum Game of Public Schooling. And then we have another film that we're bringing on Monday, April 15th. Who Cares About Kelsey? We'll have a screening and a panel discussion with the filmmaker, Dan Habib, and also who the film features, Kelsey Carroll. That's on Monday, April 15th. So we have a few events going on, so I hope to see this same level of energy at those events as well. So I just want to say a bit before we watch the film. I met Derek Koen, the director of this film project, and Ouida Washington, the producer at the annual meeting of the American Educational Research Association a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, where they were doing a screening of this film. And I knew then that we needed to bring this film to Syracuse because while it does bring to the fore the realities of school and social inequities and the school-to-prison pipeline, this film is about promoting solutions. To date, we brought other films like Waiting for Superman and Precious Knowledge last year, which were very powerful films. And we've had many speakers to talk about the issues related to school achievement and the way the public school systems are failing many youth. Today, my hope for this session is that we will see and talk about solutions and also acknowledge our own individual and collective responsibility in being a part of change and transformation in our schools and our communities. Derek, Ouida, and Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz of Teachers College have worked together to bring this film to educational communities to incite dialogue and action. Dr. Sealey-Ruiz is an English educator, teacher educator, and scholar. In addition to being on the faculty at TC, she continues to teach weekly with African American and Latino male high school students. In 2011, she guest edited a special issue on preparing teachers to teach Black students, preparing Black students to become teachers in the Journal of Negro Education. So this has been an issue that she's been working on and really trying to bring attention to this. So we are really fortunate to hear from her. She will highlight some of the issues and pose questions for us to consider after we watch the film. She leads a series at TC, now in its 4th year, called the Racial Literacy Roundtables, that brings scholars, students, and community members together to discuss issues that impact urban education, like race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and teacher and student identity. And I'm just blessed, one, because she's my friend and my sister, and that she introduced me to Derek and Ouida, and that we have this opportunity to view this film today and to hear her speak. She inspires and encourages us to see truth and to do something about what we bear witness to on a daily basis. And this film will do the same. So that I know that after our viewing of this film and our engaging in dialogue with Dr. Sealey-Ruiz, Derek Koen, and Ouida Washington, we will be moved, encouraged, and we will not remain silent. So I welcome you to view the film. I think we're ready. We're ready to go? Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have about 15 minutes of commentary, and I want to say good afternoon to all of you. And I would like to thank you for being here with us. I especially thank Dean Douglas Bicklin for conceiving and supporting the Urban Education Landscape Series. I thank Dr. Haddix for chairing the lecture series, and I admire Dr. Haddix as a scholar, and I appreciate the example that she gives as she serves her community, both within the walls of Syracuse and outside. I too am blessed to have her as a sister and as a colleague. I want to say thank you to Jennifer, wherever you are, Jennifer Russo and your team, for your hospitality. Thank you so much for making us feel welcome. My co-presenters and I feel honored, and we hold the invitation here to be with all of you in very high esteem. So this afternoon, we'd like to extend our own invitation, and one that asks you to think about the themes in this film in relation to your own teaching lives. One that asks you to imagine your role in the academic and social success of Black males in your community. So when I was a teenager, I loved playing the game 20 Questions. Anyone remember that game, 20 Questions? Am I that old? All right, okay. So a bunch of us would gather around, and we decided that only 20 of the most personal questions could be asked among us. We took an oath to answer these questions honestly. And the goal was to learn as much as we could about one another, things that made us happy or sad, things that frightened us or made us feel safe. And so we were interested in becoming closer friends, and one of the ways we did this was to ask these 20 questions. So while I'd like to play a slightly different game of 20 questions with all of you, I have 20 questions embedded in my comments this afternoon. And as you hear the question, I want you to answer it to yourself, honestly. These are questions that I've asked myself and my students, both my high school students and my teacher education students, over and over again. And I invite all of you to answer these questions and hold your responses up for further reflection and conversation even beyond our time together this afternoon. So in 1962, author and activist James Baldwin published a letter that he wrote to his nephew James. And in the letter he said, quote, "You were born into a society which spelled out with brutal clarity and in as many ways as possible that you were a worthless human being. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. You were born where you faced the future that you faced because you were Black and for no other reason," unquote. So how can we admit that there is truth in what James wrote to his nephew and help to rewrite that narrative? Where do we begin? How can we take action against what seems like monolithic, intractable structures in our society today that help perpetuate some of the beliefs that Baldwin wrote about 50 years ago? Perhaps we can begin by reflecting on what we just saw and finding our place inside of this work. We can follow the example of Namib, a 9th grade teacher at a boys' academy in New Orleans, who saw beyond the bricks, and he had this to say. Quote, "The film really affirms some of the views that I already had and also some of the issues that I've already seen. It kind of lets me know that I'm on a path thinking about how to solve these problems. It really just lets me know that I'm not the only one that's thinking this and that I'm not crazy. And I'm not out of the box. It's something that has to be done, and it's just trying to figure out how to mobilize people to want to do it. And that's pretty much what the film has done for me," unquote. So now that you've seen the film, are you thinking about the ways in which you can mobilize people in your school and in your home communities to tackle the negative outcomes that many Black males experience in school? Are you thinking about the role that you must play in helping to bring about this change? And as educators, I'm speaking to the teachers who are in the room and the teacher education students. Are we willing to shift the way in which we write the narratives of Black male youth in our classrooms and admit that heavy influence that the media, that arts and entertainment have on how we view and ultimately treat Black males? Are we willing to do our part, however small it is, even to offer a word of encouragement, a smile to the Black students that we meet, that we teach, those that we pass on the street? Are we prepared to have honest conversations about the ways in which our public institutions stack the deck against Black males in our society? Are we willing to delve into learning about how racist ideology about Black males are the foundation of institutional structures that lock them into cycles of underperformance and underachievement in school and in society? What role do we play as educators in maintaining or disrupting these systems? What does this maintenance and disruption look like? How do we teach, for those of you who are teacher educators, how do we teach our teacher education students to be critical scholars so that they may negotiate successfully for themselves, but also for their Black male students? So Derek and Ouida have done their part in helping to rewrite this narrative through their film. And when I think about other films that depict Black male students in urban schools, Beyond the Bricks, for me, serves as a powerful cinematic counter-narrative. So let me explain what I mean by reminding you of the opening sequences of some very popular Hollywood films that many of us have seen. So films that supposedly portray what life is like in urban schools, more often than not, these films turn out to be filled with stereotypical images of out-of-control Black and Latino students and heroic white teachers who save them. These exhausted storylines must be deconstructed and challenged. For example, in the opening scenes of the Hollywood blockbusters Dangerous Minds, 187, Stand and Deliver, and Freedom Writers, the audience is greeted with grainy sequences of urban landscape. Graffiti-splattered walls, drug deals, images of students in chaos, mostly Black and Latino, sometimes Asian. The background sounds, shriek of crying babies, adults yelling and cursing, and police sirens. When viewers are taken into the high schools, we see disorder, we see wandering students who have no interest in learning. In stark contrast, Beyond the Bricks opens in a busy hallway of Barringer High School Success Academy's 9th grade campus. The Black students, with a sprinkling of Latino youth, populate the corridor, walking their way to class, to lunch, to homeroom, other areas of the school. And the students are fairly well-dressed, low volume, jovial, playful with each other, and happy to mug for the camera as they pass it. The halls, although narrow, are bright. The floor is baby blue. The lockers and the classroom doors are clean, and they look new. Now, Derek places the camera at the end of the hallway against the student traffic so that the students are moving forward and not milling around aimlessly and chaotically that's often depicted in films. So soon, one young man appears at the top of the screen, standing still amidst the flow of students, and the camera zooms in close to introduce Shaquille, an adorable and smiling kid with wireframe glasses. And as the hallway empties, Shaquille remains still smiling at the camera, and then Derek asks Shaquille if he thinks he's smart. I think I'm smart. Shaquille answers definitively, and these are some of the first words that we hear. So it is useful when one examines the impact of the documentary Beyond the Bricks to place it in context of these popular urban high school movies that have traditionally been accepted among teacher educators as authentic and realistic representations of the urban classroom. So thankfully, there is a canon of literature critiquing the representation of Black youth in urban school dramas that is useful for future and present teachers. So scholars like Nasir and McLaughlin and Jones, Bowman, Grant, Trier, Sealey-Ruiz, that's me, and Green, have done interesting work examining these films and media for what they claim represents the typical urban classroom. Nasir argues that mass media, popular film included, offers very few identity choices for which Black youth can embrace. He says, quote, for African American youth, media images reinforce stereotypes of these groups as potentially dangerous, anti-intellectual, and downtrodden, unquote. So I ask all of you, why take the time to analyze these opening sequences? Why are these images important for us to pay attention to? I believe that there is tremendous value in the rare cinematic structure used by Beyond the Bricks. Two young black male students giving their side of the story, having their point of view honored. An analysis of these images hopefully convinces educators and all of us to engage in critical and frequent analyses, not just of media, but also of social and economic policies that fuel unequal opportunities. Beyond the Bricks represents a good tool for such critical analysis as it uses the art of documentary to bring these young men's stories into conversation with African American leaders and scholars fighting for change on the ground in cities and in neighborhoods and in the policy arena. So after Shaquille, we meet Eric, who admits his role in his academic failure, but reminds us of the toll of consistently unsupportive teachers and learning environments and the trauma and trauma that plays in the life of a young person and their school life. He says, quote, "You can't just say kids are bad at first. There's normally something that happens to them that turns them into the type of person that becomes like, I just don't care about nobody," unquote. Being separated from his mother by Newark's Division of Youth and Family Services destroyed him, he soon confesses. Through their own words, we are invited to emotionally invest in Eric and Shaquille on their terms. Their narration challenges how students like them are positioned and responded to in schools. And while we think about this, let's consider a few more questions. How can we, all of us in this room, those who are concerned with the education of students of color, particularly black males, critique and thus reframe existing educational research and policies in ways that recognize the brilliance within our students? How might we reshape the current theoretical frameworks, the methodological designs, and the pedagogical practices that many of us have come to rely on, right? Gotta get the dissertation done, right? Gotta write the grant. We rely on it in ways that, how can we shift it to center the powerful voices and perspectives and stances of black male students? When we look at the hard facts that graduation rates are declining for black males across the country as their suspension rates go through the roof, do we have the courage to disrupt decades of these negative outcomes? Do we have the courage to listen to these young people and incorporate their stories into the curriculum and ultimately into their overall schooling experiences? This work doesn't just rest on teachers, but other educational stakeholders have an important role to play. So for example, schools of education like Syracuse University, like Teachers College, like NYU, we can do a much better job in preparing pre-service teachers to support the social and academic success of their black male students. School administrators can do a better job at supporting communities and parents as they do their best, or as they learn and as they continue to take an active role in the educational and social lives of their children. But we can only do this through honest talk and honest intentions, through building racial literacy and witnessing and acting upon our strength as a collective. We have to repeatedly ask ourselves at every level, from the international to the local, what have we done to address the pervasive issues of academic underpreparedness, unfair social policies and practices, and feelings of powerlessness and fear felt by too many of our black male students, situations and feelings that readily lead to disparate results about what they can and cannot do in schools, and thus in the larger socio-political world. What still needs to be done, and who is going to do it? What must be done to not just interrupt, but to completely dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline that exists in many of our schools? How do we increase the confidence of black mothers and fathers so that when they send their black boys to school, that they can trust that they will be treated fairly and equally and with love? How do we teach teachers? How do we teach students to move forward from their realities with love for themselves and for others. Can this transformation happen in the classroom? I submit to all of you that it must. Beyond the Bricks is a rallying call for this transformation, for teachers, for communities, for the young men themselves, to bring about much needed change so that race and gender do not continue to be the main predictors for social and academic success or failure in our nation. And as much as we celebrate the second term of our first Black president, we must admit that as a nation, America is not yet post-racial. We are strong in a multitude of ways, yes, but we are very weak when it comes to facing the racial history that still affects the life chances of millions of young people today. And as monumental as the task of making a difference seems, this task can be met if we each decide to think more reflectively, to act differently, checking our habits and our hearts when we take in images, when we think about, and when we interact with Black males. Are we prepared to take on problem-solving approaches, or will we remain entrenched in the deficit perspectives that insist that change cannot happen? Change can happen. I'm feeling like I'm channeling Obama here, right, a little bit. So change can happen if we will it to happen. And while you may not expect me to quote Mary Poppins, I think that one of the songs from this Broadway hit is just the encouragement that we all need to remember. So Mary Poppins in Cast reminds us through song that anything can happen if we let it. So we simply cannot continue to accept underachievement as normal for some of our children. And Beyond the Bricks convinces us that we must address the ways in which public education and other related institutions are not supporting Black males. Derek and Ouida have answered yes to addressing this issue. I have answered yes to this same call. And now my 20th and final question for this afternoon remains. Will you join us? Thank you.
So we have many questions to consider, and I'm sure you have many thoughts, comments, and questions of your own. So I'd like to open it up now to hear from Derek and Ouida, Yolanda, and if you all have questions that you want to pose to the panel. Do you all want to start with a few?
I'll get over it soon. We did lots of focus groups with these young men throughout Newark. And what we were hearing from them was a very different story. Even boys who had dropped out of school and come back all believed that they had possibility, that there were great possibilities for them. But everything else we were hearing and everything else we were seeing was saying that they didn't. So now we wanted to find out where was this falling apart. So that's why we got to the scholars, and Dr. Noguera, I think, really lays it out in terms of what a good education is and what we should be expecting from our children, our schools, and from teachers in general. So what we did with the film, what we did with the film was actually take it to, we did an initial 10-city tour. The film is 30 minutes because there were lots of issues that we wanted to pack in there and not have people bored, but really it was an opportunity to have conversation. So it's a half-hour film, and our tours were basically 2-3 hours. So we wanted the community to really have time to really think about what the solutions were. And that community for us consisted of the young men themselves, parents, community leaders, philanthropy, people who were putting money into education, as well as educators themselves. To really bring them together and have them think about themselves as a community, rather than as these very separate parts. An opportunity to bring them together to have a conversation. And from there, we've now, I think, done about 66 cities over the last couple of years. And everyone's concerned about this issue. It's something that should be galvanizing us, But what keeps happening, unfortunately, is that they have a conversation, but no one really knows how to move forward. And again, we as filmmakers want to present this issue and ask you for some solutions. So that's why we're here. Thank you. That's my question.
I was very impressed by
Thank you.
your speech in supercalifragilistic.
Espialidocious.
And it got me to thinking about sort of stereotypes and expectations, and I was thinking about so I'm originally from Newark, and I moved around a lot, not just in Newark, in South Carolina, and New York, and when I moved around, I would go to a new school, and me being a black male, and y'all noticed I'm like 6'3", and people would think that I could play basketball, and I really can't, no sport. And they would recruit me automatically to the gym and want to see my jumper or want to see my handle, and I would have to find an excuse why it wasn't time for me to show these skills, because I knew once they saw that I sucked, that all the celebrity would leave. And so I thought about that while you were saying that, and I just wanted to bring that up as a part of my conversation about stereotypes and expectations, and in the long run, what that may have done or can do to other people. So the film for me started sort of, I have a 20-year-old son now, and at the time he was about 17, and he was having a lot of issues in school, and I wanted to figure out a way where we could sort of like fight the power against the school system, because I didn't feel like he was being treated like a precious child the way that I thought of him. And the first film, the title was called Behind Enemy Lines, and because that's how I felt that he was behind enemy lines in the school system. And after a lot of research and a lot of conversations, I found out, or came to realize, that I was also one of the enemies in his life, because I wasn't doing everything that I needed to do to support him, to make him the academic person that he could have been. And I often blame myself, and I often think about the places and the times where I failed him, because my son, he eventually dropped out of school, eventually did all the things that happen because you are not engaged or supported in school. So he went to jail, and I still think that he's redeemable, and I still think that he could have a great future, but he has to grab on for some of this for himself. But with that experience, I know that my other children are going to be more than powerful, more than great, because I learned from those mistakes, and I put a tremendous time of energy and time and emotional, just holding them and telling them that who I think they are, what I want them to be, not a profession, but as far as I want you to be successful, I want you to be powerful, and I want you to know that the more information that you have, the better off you will be. And I'm constantly pumping that into them. Even when they're asleep, I might go into their ear and just tell them how powerful they are, how great they are, because I know that they hear me. And this film did that for me. This film let me go around the country and meet people, and people come up and talk about how their kids are having certain issues and how they feel that the school is not loving them. And my response to them is that it's not just all up to the school, because that's what I thought initially. I thought that as long as I had bottled water for him to drink and somewhat healthy food, then my part was over, and the school was supposed to do the other part. But now I know that my part is probably more important than the school, but the partnership that we make with the school is even more powerful. So I'm trying to make sure that in my children's life that I'm friends, not friends, but a partnership with the principal, with the teachers, so that one of the things I realized is that through that partnership, they understand that there's no limit to what I will do to make sure that my kids get what they deserve and what the school district has to offer. And instead of them taking it as a affront to them, they see it as a parent that I can count on that can help me to connect to other parents. And also it holds my kids accountable too, because my kids know that there is a connection between us and the teacher, us and the principal, so you can't just do whatever it is that you thought you were going to do, because we constantly communicate. So I think that those are some of the things that are going to help my babies become great students. And you know, they'll stop me because I'll keep going on and on and on and on. But I just wanted to say that I'm excited by all the possibilities for what media has to offer and the influences that media can have on other people positively, because I know that, and we all know that media can have a very negative effect on folks. And you guys just jump in because I'll just keep going. But another thing that I wanted to bring up, and it was, I thought about it because of your
Mary Poppins.
not about Mary Poppins, but about media and media's portrayal of black males, and that's what led me into the stereotype of me being able to play basketball, because it also so when I moved from Newark and I went down south, then it was like this guy coming from up north, and you had to have certain qualities, or then you weren't like something that they was expecting, but their experience was from the television. The television told them that you had to have some kind of East Coast swag, and you had to be a bad boy, and you had to all of these things. And so then you find yourself being forced to have to live into those things when that was not me at all. And then moving to New York, then it was like you're an outsider being in New York, and now you have to be a certain way as a black male. And when I was in New York, it was the first time I was ever around white people as students. I was always around white people as teachers, but as students, and it was different. And anybody who went to school with white people, like the white school dynamic is totally different. So in Newark, it's like if you could beat me, then you could tell me what to do. But in the white school dynamic, it was like if you were like good at sports, or if you were a nerd, or I forget what they call like the kids who were like all goth or something. And it was like that was the hierarchy system, and the jocks got to tell you what to do and all this other stuff. So it was very different for me coming into that environment. And I was from an environment where like violence like got things done. So that's how I interacted with people. And then I kind of start finding out just from being in this different environment that you could do way more with words than you could with your fists. And I was going somewhere about the media, but yeah, somebody, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have lots of questions. We'll start up here and then make our way back.
I probably won't get the opportunity to ask, so I'm going to ask two questions. One is, how did you all arrive on Shaquille and Eric? And the second is, in your research, when do you feel the numbers started to decline in education for black males, and what do you attribute to that? So I guess it's kind of three.
I'm going to ask you to clarify the second one, if you don't mind.
Well, if the graduation rates, the dropout rates for black males is decreasing, I'm curious on when that started to happen, and what were some of the factors in the numbers going in a downward trajectory?
You want to answer the first question? Okay. Okay. The first question was, what made you land on Shaquille and Eric? And the second was, when did you begin to notice these statistics, these numbers, this decline, the graduation rates, and so forth for black males?
Right. Like I said, we did a lot of focus groups looking for, we initially thought it would be 3 students, but we decided on two students. And it was really about, in the end, really it was about who would be comfortable on camera and who would be able to articulate their story. And the 2 of them really stood out, Shaquille in particular, because we actually almost didn't believe him up front, because he sounded like a preacher. When we were talking to him, he had all of these great like one-liners kind of deal. I was like, where's this coming from? But we talked to him several times, and like this was this kid, and we met him through a truancy program, and it just seemed such a strange, but the story that we really wanted to tell was that we were missing out on all of these great kids because of these issues that were happening at education. And he never blamed, he actually really talked a lot about what was happening, as he said, it was chaos and pandemonium in school. So he never thought it was the teachers. He understood the teachers really had a lot to deal with because the kids were coming in with all of these other issues. And so it was really taking away from his education. And he decided not to come because of that chaos. So, and Eric, I think his story, and as a part of also some of the research we were doing about how many kids were going through so many other things at home that were really sort of affecting their school performance. And so his story really sort of mirrored a lot of what we were also learning about. So that's ultimately why we chose the two of them.
And to answer your question, the special issue that Dr. Haddix mentioned earlier that we did in 2011, we invited scholars from across the country to publish research in this special issue. And we have a couple of articles that actually trace the decline of teaching among, and it's not exactly sort of correlation and causation, but what you see over time, over decades, as blacks were able to get into other professions and not just be domestic workers or teachers, and as schools became integrated, we began to see this sort of shift in terms of rates of suspension going up. I'm kind of giving a gloss over because it's much more detailed than this, but suspension rates sort of going up and being assigned to special education classes. So many scholars sort of look and pinpoint to integration as one piece. Other scholars sort of look at the fact that there were widening opportunities for African Americans who went into other professions. And to date, there are about 2% of black males across the country who are teachers. And as you know, Arne Duncan in 2010 and Obama, they're trying to increase more black males because there's a belief, right, that black males is needed, right? And I think that that's important. I think all teachers are important, but particularly they're feeling there's a void of black males in the classroom, whereas let's say in 1940, probably 4 out of 10 folks in front of the classroom was a black male. And then as civil rights legislation happened and black folks were able to go into different careers, into business and so forth, they left the classroom and these other issues started proliferating. So it's no sort of one issue. You have to look at it over a timeline. And there's actually an article in the journal of a doctoral student who is studying just this, the decline of black teaching and the effects of how that's impacting black students. And she traces from 1940 all the way up until 2010 and reviews the literature. It's a compelling story. Yeah, I'll give you the information. Absolutely. You can probably get it free online because I think our articles are up there.
And by the way, we actually did the film in 2009, and so some of those numbers are even worse in terms of graduation rates. We're actually from New York, and the New York rates at the time were 32% graduation rate. Now they're 28% graduation rate. And New York City rather has the highest enrollment of black males in the country. So it's a crisis.
And
you know.
I can speak a little bit quickly to New York because I'm from New York and I have been selected. New York has this Young Men's Initiative under Mayor Bloomberg, where George Soros gave $250 million of his own money, and Bloomberg gave $250 million of his own money. And there are these multiple programs. So I'm actually the lead consultant for the Empowering Boys Initiative, which is a small piece of the Young Men's Initiative. But there are multiple programs that are trying to address this. And the issue is it's not just one program or multiple programs. We have to change our hearts. We have to change our minds. We have to have honest conversations about what race is in this country. And those conversations have to be in our schools of education, in our homes. So it's not just the parents. It's not just the teachers. It's like this, I call it the Holy Trinity, right? And it's all of those points working together. But I think until we can have honest conversations about the impact of race and structures, it's going to be very, very difficult, right? which doesn't leave me hopeless. I'm always hopeful because I believe in the power of the one person. But I think on a large scale, to make impact, we have to come together as a nation and have conversations we have not yet had.
I have a question.
I'm currently right now a preschool teacher, and I find that early childhood education is one of, if not the most important part of our education system. So I guess my question is, what are your views of early childhood education and its importance in the fact that a lot of our children are being denied the possibility to access the type of education?
I can speak from it as a point of view of a mother, right? And that is, I agree with everything that you said, and I have, one of my dearest mentors is our early childhood educator, Suzanne Carruthers. And all children deserve solid early childhood education, really good early childhood education. My daughter, unfortunately, I took her to a preschool, and Olivia is, if you meet her, I think you'd love her, but she's not your typical girl, whatever that means. And I just remember having a conversation with her preschool teacher, where she said to me, you know, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something not right with your daughter. And that hurt me a lot, because Olivia is, I've now have taken her out of, you know, 2 public schools, which hurts me because I'm still in the public school teaching. But there was no space for her difference and for who she is, right? And so in me moving her out of that preschool place, moving her out of a kindergarten place, and now having her in a private school, she's thriving. So yes, early childhood education, but the right early childhood education, and being able to prepare early childhood teachers for our diverse society, both linguistically, ethnically, racially. I mean, not both, but all of these differences. Does that make sense? But yes, that's right on with you, brother. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Pastor Phil Curran. Liz, Marcel.
Hello.
I'm so glad that you all came. I'm so glad that you all brought this process to fruition. And first of all, I want to express that there are times, because of the overwhelming responsibility on our culture and the conditions that we're dealing with, pastors often get overwhelmed and exhausted. Mm-hmm. All right? So that's what happened there.
Okay. Do you need an amen?
Amen.
Okay.
This is the beginning of the questions. First of all, we have to understand that the condition that we're dealing with now is the result of 400 years to intentionally disengage, disempower the black male with the beginning of slavery. Millions were able to overcome the onslaught of racism, of Jim Crow, but then millions didn't. So what we're witnessing now is that it worked. It worked. A young male without a father had the father disempowered. Okay, now we're seeing the results of disempowered fathers and forefathers. Okay, and so what we need to understand, and I'm so glad to see so many people here, and the School of Education brought this, because you have to come out of here with the knowledge that you have like bats out of hell. Okay, because what we're dealing with is a consequence that a nation caused. And only a nation can stop this out of control runaway freight train. It is even too overwhelming for the black community by itself to stop the train. The whole nation that caused the train to be out of control has to get on the track and start pushing back. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, what is the school of education here, and what schools of education in all the areas of higher learning throughout the country doing to educate their students that this is not a recent phenomenon, but it is a result that has taken 400 years to develop, and that we're given, so that they know, so that they begin to understand that this is not just because there's a behavioral issue with black males, and it was intentional, and the results are coming home. Okay? Then I think that they also need to understand that everyone is teachable. And you must be convinced. You must be convinced, because I'm going to tell you something. You're going to go back to families that are not going to be behind your tenacity to try to push back against this freight train. And many people are going to try to discourage you and tell you that there is something ethnic about intelligence, and there is not.
Well, thank you for that encouragement. I mean, Dr. Haddix and also Dr. Zaleen and other folks who are in the room can speak to that. There's fields of literature, social justice literature, literature about critical pedagogy that we use in our classroom and in our teacher education program. Even the literature of culturally responsive education, which has a history of 43 years. You know, so folks like James Banks and Gloria Latson-Billings. So there are scholars, and there are teacher scholars, and there are student scholars that engage in this and have been, you know, in the past 30 or 40 years. But as we know with any movement, whether it's the feminist movement or civil rights movement, things don't happen quickly, they happen with ripple effect. And so that's the kind of research that we try to engage in. That's the type of conversation, just having the landscape series, you know, giving the shout out to Dr. Dean Bicklin, of having the community, right, come, where you have teacher educators, you have teachers, you have professors, you have us, that we can engage together in this conversation. This is all part of that ripple.
And if I can just add to that, I think in terms of responsibilities, the community has it. There's a system within the community that's not sort of supporting children, black children in that respect. So I think we all have a responsibility here to make sure, and as you say, they're learning all the time. So what they're learning at home, they're also taking into schools and vice versa. So I think that's important to also know. Thank you.
I just want to say that it has to go even beyond just the School of Education here at Syracuse University. The School of Education can't take this on by itself. It needs to be within every school here on this campus. From the dean, from the chancellor, everybody has to have a say in this at this point. We had an incident on campus this week where 9 students were arrested after a party. And then you had a response from a student here that was very, I would say, racist. And I don't know what year the student is in, but in 3 years, 4 years, we're going to graduate this person. And what would he have learned from being here at this university about different people? And I think that's something that we as a university have to take on.
Mm-hmm. And Syracuse is not alone. I mean, even, you know, Teachers College, that's the whole point of the racial literacy roundtables, and sometimes the usual suspects show up, the people who are already kind of in that mindset. And that's why I say individually, how do we reach out to folks? Because it's easy to talk to folks who think like you and are already on board with you. But a lot of us don't have, when I talk about literacy, like reading, writing, we don't have that racial literacy. We don't feel comfortable, you know, going across lines. Like, how about going up to that student and say, hey, what you said, really, this is how I was impacted. But we have to have the language to do that. So we all have a lot of work to do. I'm with you, Reva.
Okay, I just want to give a few comments. My name is Yolanda, and I'm Mr. I'm a city councilor. I am co-founder and president of Mothers Against Gun Violence, and I'm also on the trauma response team. So I just have a couple of things
Busy woman.
touched on, and we talked about policy, media, and trauma. Those are what I want to touch on. Because we've been working with the city of Syracuse very closely with our Syracuse.com or whatever we want to call it these days. And they have a tendency, when there's something that happens in the black community, they'll point it out on the south side, south side, south side. So everybody in the world don't know the south side. So we've been working with them to get them to now call the street, stop calling the side of town. Because whoever lives on it knows the city, they know where they are. So they have been good about doing that. And then when we talk about trauma, we got babies as far back as 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. We go into schools. We work with elementary school kids, and when we ask the question, how many of you have been affected by the violence in the community? 200 hands go up, the tears start, and then the people in charge of the school looking at me saying, oh, well, we didn't know. How do you not know you have all this trauma amongst these babies? So that's a problem for me. So I've been doing a lot of talking because we need start getting our babies the help they need. They may have come from a home, mama been gone for a week, no food in the cabinet, and they try to get their two brothers off to school. That's trauma, that's a problem. So I've been working with the White College. They bring us in every year, and we talk to the kids going into teaching to try to make them aware of what they're going to be walking into these inner city schools. So we're a resource for them when they need to reach back out to the community. The last piece I want to talk about is racism and policy. Sitting on the council, we get an agenda, consolidating our city, fine by me. But when I approach them with taking my school district with me, message comes back to me, if the school's attached, we don't want it. So you know what? You don't get it. My babies should get that opportunity and vice versa. So just want to say that to say, we all have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take us all together to put this together around the country. I'm done.
I just want to say, I was listening to what you were saying, and one of our main focuses with the film is not to just show the film and go home. So we created the film so that we can use it exactly the way it's being used tonight in this kind of environment where different people from around the community comes together. But people always come up afterwards and say, what's next? And what can I do? Because what happens is, like, everybody will have their comments or say what they feel is wrong or what's going on, and then people will get motivated, but they don't know, what can I do today and what can I do tomorrow? And then a week later, you know, the next thing has come along and people, you know, they kind of left that behind. So what we did was we created workshops so that people can come together and start to plan what can our next step be. And especially like an environment like this where all of these young people that are in the room who don't have any kids and just have a bunch of energy and they want to save the world, like this is the place where you can you come in and give them a charge and they'll go make it happen. And we see that because the person who is the President of the United States of America is there mostly because young people said, we want to see something different, and they got their voice out there and they made it happen. And throughout history, we know that young people are the people who got out there in the streets with Martin Luther King. You might not see them on the main photo, but those young people are out there taking the rocks and, you know what I mean, doing the do. So here is a place where to make the connection with Dr. Bicklin and Dr. Haddix here at the college, and I want to say this just so that everybody kind of get a sense of who I am. Dr. Bicklin was great to bring us here with the film. We met him in New Orleans, and he was very concerned about making sure that the film had closed captions so that it could be inclusive of everybody. That was like the first question that he said, does it have closed caption? So, like, and now that we have him here in the room, just make sure that there's a conversation before you go out, that is there a way that we can get together and make some other plan, and maybe, like, everybody has a lane to play. Like, our lane is, we're filmmakers, and we feel like we made a tool that people can use and go to start and have these conversations, but everybody has to know that there's a lane for you, and you have a responsibility in your community to do some work, and everybody can't be the main person in the front. Somebody got to be in the back doing some of the work, and they got to take that role and hold it. But everybody in this room, whoever wants to step up and try to make some difference, because when we got here, we got a tour of, we realize now that we're on the hill, and we got a tour of where the line ends and where the south side begins. And I know just from all the other communities I lived in that those things are not by mistake, but they don't have to be there. And because the president is the president, and not because the individual. It's just because of the people decided that this person has the ideals that I think that I want to support. So that same kind of energy, now I really believe, because I used to say that before, that anything's possible, but sort of not really believing it. But now I know for sure that anything is possible with the will of the majority of the people to get together and say, we're not going to take this, we're not going to stand for it. And the people who are elected officials, like, hold them accountable, and if it can't go down, then it has to be somebody else in the place. And not saying that you're not doing your thing. I'm just saying, like, anybody who, right, and that's the bottom line. And we have to realize that from this process, that whoever does not have our best interests at hand, that we have to show them in no uncertain terms that you are not the person that's gonna have my vote and you're gonna go, because I learned throughout these, I'm 21, and I learned throughout these years that
and I'm 17.
Right. But money, this country understands money. And whenever you start affecting dollars, things begin to change. So that's what I'll say.
So we're coming to a close. However, I wanted to say something, and I think I have one last question. So Derek, Ouida, and Yolanda had a chance today to go to Danforth Middle School on the south side. We have 2 Danforth students in the room. And they had a special screening of the film for 28th graders, and had lunch and had a discussion. And so I thought it'd be fitting if Ms. Jassini, you have a question that you want to pose?
Yes, I'm Jassini. I'm a 14-year-old, and
you know what? Come up here and take the mic.
I'm an 8th grader at Danforth Middle School, and I've experienced this personally, how us as African American students are affected in general as a whole, because I have a lot of friends who go through trauma and pain on a daily basis, to where which it affects them academically, where they don't want to be in school because they feel that what they're learning in school doesn't really benefit them outside of school because of the situations that they go through outside of school. And I feel like it's somewhat my obligation to help encourage my fellow students, considering that last year our graduation rate was 32% in our high schools. So that was the lowest in the region. So I feel like as a student, as an African American student, we're obligated to be an example for the rest of them, considering that we do have a lot of stereotypes and labels and hurdles that we have to somewhat overcome at an early age. So like, people stereotype me, and I have one situation where a teacher has stereotyped me and made a racial comment to me. And I feel like it's a really important topic because people don't address it. And even in my school, they don't address the issue. They make it seem like it's a small issue that really doesn't need to be addressed. So I'm happy that the issue is getting addressed.
The panelists are here, and if you want to come up and greet them or ask additional questions, please do, but I'd like to give you all another round of applause. And I'd like to say to all of you that are here, we have our charge, and I think this lecture series, you know, we only do it 2 or 3 times a semester, but it's great to come together to have this kind of dialogue and to really begin to think about what we must do. So let's keep doing it. Thank you.